Please help me in welcoming Nataly Kogan.
I had to run a long way. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. You're awesome. Thank you. Wow, hello, awesome humans. One more time. Hello, awesome humans. I have to tell you something awesome. So I always address audiences, hello, awesome humans. And this is the first conference that I get to do it, and I'm on theme, so I'm super grateful. I'm on brand. So I want to start by telling you how grateful I am that all of you have chosen to spend some time with me this afternoon, and more than anything, to share a little bit of your heart and a little bit of your mind with me. It's an honor, truly honored to be here. And I am here today because I found a way to do something that I thought was never going to be possible. I struggled and I figured it out, and I know that every single one of you cares about the same thing, so this is why I'm so excited to share it with you. And the thing that I found out how to do that I never thought was possible is how to do work that I love in a way that fuels me rather than drains me and exhausts me. And perhaps more importantly, how to help people that work with me, my colleagues, my team members, feel that they can truly bring their best self to their work. But I want to start by sharing a little bit of my journey because the way that I got here was so unexpected. I don't have a PhD. I didn't learn about happiness in a lab. That's my dad. He's a PhD in the family in polymer physics, and his dissertation was 7 lines long. I was supposed to memorize it when I was 7. I'm 43. I still don't have it. So I didn't learn about happiness in a lab. In fact, I spent most of my life as a huge happiness skeptic. I thought that the only way you could feel happy is if you struggled and worked super hard and kept going and going to get your way here. I'm also realizing my slides are advancing, and I didn't mean to. Can we go back to my title slide, please? Thank you. Thank you. And the reason that I want to start by sharing my journey is because I bet there's some of you in the audience who may feel this way. Of course, we're at a conference called Workhuman, and you came to a session on happiness, but maybe you are where I was, where you don't quite know how to connect happiness at work, or you don't quite know how to do work that's meaningful and that you love and not get drained and exhausted. So I want to tell you a little bit about how I got here. So as Lori mentioned, I grew up in the former Soviet Union, and when I was 13 years old, my parents and I left almost everything we had and everyone we knew behind and set out on this journey to try and make our way to the United States as refugees. It was, I think at 13, it's scary to move across the street and to leave everything you know behind and to set out on this journey. It was so overwhelming in a way. And I have to tell you, I'm sharing this photo with you. I was going to say this before, I just jumped into it. It's the only photo we have from this time. This is my parents and I. I'm wearing the very fashionable high-waisted pleated pants. They're coming back in. No making fun of me. So this is one of the only photos we have from this time. And it was so overwhelming. We spent several weeks in a refugee camp in Vienna and then took the train, this is the photo, to a refugee camp in Italy where we would spend the next 2 months applying for permission to come to the US as refugees. And there are 2 things I remember from that time very clearly. The first was being hungry all the time. As a teenager, I think you're just hungry. I have a 14-year-old daughter. You're just hungry, period. But my mom would give us breakfast in the morning, and then she would tell me, please don't come back to the apartment. We share this apartment with another family. Please don't come back until it's 6 o'clock, because I'm afraid you're going to smell food in the kitchen, and I don't have any more food to give you. I'm a mom of a teenager. I'm a mom of a child. It was so scary for me to feel hunger, but it was even scarier to realize how hungry my parents must have been. And the other scary thing was just uncertainty. We didn't have guarantees that we'd make it to the United States. And so it was this life-changing experience, but in a really scary way. And so when we got permission to come to the US as refugees, it was the greatest dream. And we started our journey in America in the projects outside of Detroit. Very grateful to have welfare and food stamps to get going. And my parents got very busy getting jobs. And I got busy feeling completely overwhelmed and just so swollen by fear and anxiety, and I didn't know how I'd ever feel better. I spoke almost no English. The English that came out of my mouth came out with this really heavy accent. And I went to 8th grade. Do you remember how kind and compassionate we are in 8th grade? Yeah, so I'll just leave the rest of that unsaid. So it was brutal. But there were moments of hope, and those were the moments that I felt good. And I felt good when I achieved something. I remember the day they moved me out of remedial English into regular English. That felt awesome. Eventually, we moved out of the projects. My dad got a job. My mom got a job. I went to high school. I graduated third in my high school class. That felt amazing. It was like this happiness bubble around me and my parents. And I remember deciding, oh, this is it. This is how I'm going to get to my American dream and feel happy. I'm going to achieve so many important things. I'm going to become so successful. And then I'll get the prize of being happy. And I spent the next 20 years of my life living according to this I'll be happy when idea. And I see a bunch of you nodding because I know that my circumstances might have been different, but I'm not alone in thinking this way, right? How many times do you catch yourself thinking, I'll be happy when, right? I'll be happy when I launch this new project or get a different job or get a promotion, meet my soulmate, redecorate my house, right? We all fall into this trap. And I worked so hard to achieve my I'll be happy whens. You know, I graduated at the top of my class at Wesleyan. I went to McKinsey, this big consulting firm, after college. By 26, I was a managing director at a venture capital firm in New York. It's an industry with fewer than 6% women. Fewer than plumbing, I checked. I started companies, I wrote books, I married my college sweetheart, we had a beautiful little daughter, we lived in New York City, this was my American dream, and on the outside, I had it all. And you'd think I'd be so happy. And yet inside, I struggled to feel just okay for more than a fleeting moment, because every time I achieved something, that happiness bubble would just pop. And my answer was, you're just not working hard enough. You're not doing enough. You are not enough. Because as long as we treat our happiness as a prize, which is how I did, well, my answer to why I didn't feel good was I wasn't working hard enough. So I worked harder, I gave myself fewer breaks, I slept less, and I pushed more. And I did this for 20 years until I couldn't do it anymore. And I still don't know the right way to describe it, but a few years ago, I just stopped being able to push. I burnt out physically. I felt completely empty and hopeless emotionally, mentally. I was failing everyone in my life who mattered, my team, my colleagues, my family, my daughter, my husband. And I was so overwhelmed and I didn't know what to do, but I didn't want to give up. There were so many meaningful things I still wanted to do. And I stumbled into research on happiness. I have to tell you, at first, I thought it was a crazy idea that someone studies happiness. You know, they say Russians are good at 3 things: suffering, making others suffer, and complaining about suffering. It's only funny if you haven't met my family. So I didn't realize that happiness is something people study, but I was desperate to find another way. And so I opened up to this research, and I opened up to learning it and practicing it. And that set me on the journey that brings me here today. And not only did I learn how to cultivate my own emotional health, but I made it my life mission to share what I learned with others. And my journey here was really difficult, but perhaps the hardest thing was shifting how I thought about what it truly means to have emotional health and be happy. And so I want to share the 3 core mindset shifts that I had to make with you. The first mindset shift was that happiness and emotional health are not extras. They're not bonuses we get for doing the right things or achieving enough. They're actually the foundation that allows us to bring our very best selves to do the very best work and show up as our fullest selves to all areas of our life. And I have to tell you, this was hard for my mind to get around. And I don't think I'm alone. There are still leaders that I encounter, people that I connect with as part of our Happier at Work program who think that what does happiness have to do with work? Why do I have to care about my employee happiness? It's this fluffy extra thing. And I get that because I was there. But there are literally mountains of research that show that when you feel good, you perform at the upper level of every performance parameter. You think better, you make better decisions, you are more creative, more productive, you collaborate better with others. And when it comes to work, the research is unequivocal. Employee happiness is not an extra. It is the foundation of how we become more engaged, how we perform better, and it's measurable, and it impacts our performance at work in measurable ways. Employees who are happier are more productive, they're more creative, they make better decisions. They are more resilient when they're going through challenges. And think about how many times a day you're going through challenge at work. Employees who are happier take 10 times less sick leave than their colleagues. And I could go on and on and on. I really care about making my slides beautiful. I could have made this really crowded. And so we're now at a point where the research is unequivocal. Employee happiness is not an extra. It is not fluffy. Happier employees are literally the fuel of the companies where they work. They contribute to higher revenue and higher profitability. So the way that I like to look at it is that happiness is not an extra, but unleashing the emotional health of employees in your teams is the greatest unrealized asset that you have in your company, in your organization. The second mindset shift that I had to make that I'm asking you to consider about emotional health is that it doesn't mean being positive all the time. You know, this idea that we may have that, happy employees are just, smiling and happy all the time, it's actually not quite right. We live in this culture that constantly tell us to, turn the negative into the positive or turn that frown upside down. But as human beings, we're not meant to feel good all the time. We actually have a whole slew of different emotions. And true emotional health means that we learn how to embrace all of the different emotions that we experience and how to get through the difficult ones with resilience. Do you know that research shows that when you feel a difficult emotion like stress, if you give yourself permission to actually experience it, if you allow yourself to acknowledge it, you get through it in a shorter amount of time and with less intensity. And so this is the second mindset shift that I'm asking you to consider, is that happiness is not about being positive all the time. True emotional health means that we learn how to embrace all of our emotions and how to get through the difficult ones with resilience and compassion. And the third mindset shift that I had to make and that I'm sharing with you was perhaps the most important. It's that happiness is not something we feel, but it is something we do. It is a skill. And like any other skill, communication, riding your bike, learning to play the piano, any other skill, the more you practice, the better you become at it. I mean, look, work is challenging. It's stressful. Life is challenging. It is hard to be a human. And so we need a set of skills that we can rely on and practice that helps us get through all these challenges we encounter throughout our days, that helps us not just survive through the life storms, big and small, but to actually learn from them and thrive. And so this is what I've dedicated my life and my career to, in researching and practicing and doing lots of trial and error around these core skills that help us to cultivate our emotional well-being. And over the last several years of my work through Happier and Happier at Work, I identified these 5 core happier skills that are all backed by science, and that research shows if you practice them consistently and intentionally, don't just make you feel good, which, by the way, I think is an awesome goal, but they actually help you to unleash your greatest performance and bring your very best self, and perhaps more importantly, help all the people around you truly, truly do their very best work. So I want to just briefly go over, can we go back one, please? I think this is like hypersensitive to my touch. I breathe on it and it moves. I love it. So I want to briefly go over the skills, and then we're going to dive into a few of them. So the first skill is acceptance. Acceptance is learning how to look at how things are and how you feel with clarity rather than judgment, and then using that as your starting point for going forward. Gratitude is the skill of focusing in, of zooming in on the small, good, kind, positive moments that are part of your life rather than taking them for granted. And it's also the skill of actively sharing your appreciation with others. Intentional kindness is a skill of sharing a little bit of your humanity with another person, with the only intention being to elevate or support them in some way and expecting nothing in return. The bigger why is the skill of connecting to your purpose in your work, but not in an abstract sense, but connecting the everyday things that you do to who do they help? Do they help your colleagues? Do they help your organization? Do they help a bigger cause? And finally, the skill of self-care is what I talk about, the skill of creating a kinder relationship with yourself, of treating yourself with compassion, of learning how to rest, and learning how to fuel yourself outside of work so that you can be your best self at work. And I've now had the honor, the true gift of teaching these skills to hundreds of thousands of people and companies, and I can tell you unequivocally, when you practice them intentionally and regularly, they help you build this foundation of emotional health. And I picked two for us to dive into a little bit deeper, just given Workhuman and what we're all here about. And I want to start with gratitude. Now, when I encountered research on gratitude initially, I thought it was a really nice idea. You know, you say thanks to people. Like, I actually kind of thought it was this American thing where at Thanksgiving dinner, you hold hands and you're like, thank you for the food and thank you, and now let's eat. Like, I actually thought that was gratitude. But I thought it was this really nice idea. And when I encountered the research that showed there's more than 11,000 different studies that connect developing a grateful mindset to feeling happier and more resilient, I was skeptical. How can something like a simple idea of saying thanks make a meaningful difference? Well, gratitude is not just an idea. When you practice gratitude intentionally as a skill, it becomes one of the most powerful yet very simple tools that you have to transform not just how you feel, but how productive and creative and resilient and motivated you and your colleagues are at work. I want to tell you the story. A few months ago, I spoke at a conference. It was a big ad tech conference, a very competitive industry. And this young woman runs up to me after my talk, and she's like, oh my God, it just clicked. It was her first job out of college. She's been with this ad agency for about a year. And she said, I'm working nonstop, 18-hour days, weekends. And she said, you know, at the beginning, I was like super energized. And then as time went on, I don't know, I got a little resentful. Like, I didn't know if anyone cares that I'm working so hard. And she's like, you know, to be honest, I actually started to look for a different job. She said, and then the other day, I come into my office, and on my desk is a little Post-it note from my boss. And it says, Ashley, thank you so much for all the hard work you've been doing. She said, it was crazy. It was like magic. All of a sudden, like that, all this exhaustion seemed to have been gone away. I didn't feel resentful anymore. I actually was energized to do my work. Think about that. And what she said, she's like, now I get it. It was gratitude. This is the power of expressing authentic gratitude to people that we work with. And there are so many research studies to prove it that show that when we are on the receiving end of gratitude at work, not only does it feel really good, which it does, but we're more motivated, we're more resilient, we're more likely to persevere through challenges. One of my favorite studies about this, I want to share it with you. It was done by Adam Grant, who's an amazing researcher and professor at University of Pennsylvania. So he and his team went into a university, and the study was done at the fundraising department of the university. So a pretty thankless job, right? You're on the phone all day calling alumni, asking for donations. And so for 2 weeks, they divided the fundraisers into two groups. And for 2 weeks, they just did their thing. They made their calls, and they tracked how many calls they made. After the 2 weeks, the control group did nothing. The experimental group had a visit from the head of the fundraising department, their boss. And the only purpose of his visit was he expressed his genuine gratitude to all of them individually, as a group and individually, for all the hard work they'd been doing. For the next 2 weeks, the group that received gratitude made 50% more calls than the other group. Think about that. That's the power of gratitude. It wasn't more money, it wasn't more bonuses, it wasn't any kind of special expensive retreat. It was feeling valued by their leader. And the researchers have done a lot of work around this. When people express gratitude towards us at work, what makes us feel that much more motivated and energized is that we feel socially valued And that is an essential ingredient for us to actually want to show up and do our work, which I think is amazing. The other awesome benefit of practicing gratitude at work is it helps us to build real, authentic relationships with our colleagues, with our team members. And, as human beings, we cannot function if we don't feel that we are connected and that we belong. The sense of belonging is one of the core human needs. Did you know that one of the top health problems in the United States is isolation? Isolation dramatically increases your risk of depression and anxiety, heart attacks, and even death. We truly, truly, as human beings, need to feel connected to others. And so when you express gratitude to someone at work, you are reminding yourself that you are surrounded by people who you appreciate, by people who support you, by people who uplift you, by people who help you out. And so practicing this incredibly simple skill actually helps to build these more authentic, more trusted relationships. It helps us to not feel alone, which is so essential. So gratitude is so powerful. I've just rattled off all this research about it. And yet, how often do we practice it? Well, when I started doing this research, I have to be honest, I was surprised. 58% of employees say they never receive gratitude from their boss. And according to several studies, 37% of leaders say they actually don't give positive feedback. I don't know if this surprises you, but given what I know about the power of gratitude, this shocks me. And when I first encountered these numbers, I'll be honest, I was super judgy about these leaders who don't express gratitude, like, oh my God, how could you? But actually, if you think about the model of leadership that we have, right? Be a tough boss, be constructive, only give constructive feedback. It starts to make sense. So we have this Happier at Work program in which we work with companies and their teams, and we practice all the 5 different skills and workshops. And there was this one very senior leader at this billion-dollar company in New York that we worked with, and he said to me something that made me pause. He said, Nataly, why should I have to say thank you to my team for doing the work they're already getting paid to do? It doesn't make any sense. And again, I study this for a living, so I started to think about all this research to counter with, and then I realized, well, it takes some vulnerability to express gratitude, right? And I can understand some of his struggle around it and some of why the leaders struggle with it. Because when we tell someone that we appreciate them, we have to open up a little bit. And the model of kind of a tough boss that many of us have grown up as leaders with. I was a boss. I always thought that was a job, to be really tough. It doesn't allow for that as much. And so I want to share with you my absolute favorite gratitude practice for teams. And I created this practice so that it can be an easy way to introduce gratitude that is already part of the flow of your day. So that reduces that personal risk a little bit to get started. It is so simple and so powerful. It's called gratitude meeting bookends, and it's exactly what it seems like. Begin and end a meeting by sharing specific and authentic gratitude with another person in the room. Now, I'm being really intentional with my words, so specific is really important. So, hey, Mike, I'm grateful for you is wonderful, but our brains don't really register that. But hey, Mike, I'm really grateful for how hard you worked on that project last week is really specific. And authentic is kind of obvious, but I just want to say you have to actually feel it. We all human beings, we can suss out each other's fakeness. And so try this practice. I've taught it to so many teams at companies of all different sizes, and I cannot tell you what the impact is. Because not only does it improve meetings, we all hate meetings. Who wants another meeting? It's like no one ever says, ooh, more meetings on my calendar, right? So not only will you, by kicking off a meeting this way, you're actually helping to have people feel a little more uplifted, a little more connected, but it actually begins this domino effect. Because when you do it in a meeting, your colleagues are more likely to do it outside of the meeting. And I want to share this. I loved it. One company where we did our Happier at Work program, they sent me a photo the week later. They put gratitude bookends on their agenda. How awesome is this? They actually, at the top and the bottom, says opening and closing with gratitude. And I'm sharing this with you to inspire you to find ways to make this gratitude meeting bookends practice integrate into the flow of your meeting. Yeah, I think gratitude belongs on your meeting agenda too. It is an incredibly simple but transformative practice, so I encourage you to give this a try. The next skill I want to dive into is intentional kindness. Now, I have to tell you, whenever I say on a stage or in a workshop that now we're going to talk about the skill of intentional kindness, there's a lot of confused faces starting to look at me because why do we need to talk about kindness as a skill? I'm a kind person, you're kind. Don't you all think you're pretty kind? We all believe that we're kind. But it actually doesn't matter if you believe you are kind. What matters is, are you practicing kindness intentionally and actively as part of your daily life? That's what really matters. And when we do, there is so much benefit that goes beyond us just feeling good. Because research shows when you do something kind, you feel good and you're also more productive and more connected to people around you. Receiving an act of kindness, being on the receiving end, actually helps us get through challenges. It makes us more motivated, but it only works if you practice. And I actually want to begin to talk about kindness by talking about the opposite of kindness. I want to talk about the impact of rudeness, not just on how we feel, but on our ability to do our work. When I was doing research for my book, I came across a study that literally blew my mind, and I'm going to share it with you. It was done in Israel in a hospital with ICU doctors. And they divided the doctors into two groups, and all the doctors received an emergency call from the ICU. Some of the doctors just ran to the ICU and they would diagnose the patient with their team. And the experimental group, on their way to the ICU, they experienced one act of rudeness. Somebody didn't hold the door for them. Somebody bumped into them and didn't say, "I'm sorry." All tiny acts of rudeness. All of us experience these on a regular basis. The doctors who experienced one act of rudeness on their way to the ICU were 40% less accurate in their diagnosis. I get goosebumps saying this, and I've said this a lot. Isn't that amazing? I mean, rudeness doesn't just feel crappy. It actually ruins our ability to do our job. And the researchers, they had cameras above the teams, the doctors, as they worked on the patient. And what they found was the reason the doctors who experienced rudeness were less accurate is they communicated less to the nurses around them. Because rudeness feels like danger. When we experience an act of rudeness, we feel fear. And when we feel fear, our body pulls everything in. Our field of vision narrows, where our brain pulls activity from our analytical areas and into actually your thighs get much stronger because fear, your body's preparing to fight. And we shut down. And so think about that. Experiencing one act of rudeness made the doctors be less accurate in their diagnosis because they stopped communicating with their teams. And the same researchers hypothesized that out of 250,000 cases of accidental deaths due to medical errors in the United States every year, that 40% are due to the doctors experiencing rudeness. I mean, holy crap. Do you know what I started doing after I read this study? I'm like the nicest person to our doctors. I bring my daughter to the pediatrician and I'm like, "Hi, Dr. Lemaitre, how was your day? How's your family? I baked you some cookies." No, I mean, I'm only a little exaggerating, but it makes you really thoughtful about just how much the impact of our behavior has on people around us and how much rudeness the impact has on us. So I was so blown away by the study, I started to dig more. And what I kept learning, I have to share it with you. I could not believe this. When we experience an act of rudeness or incivility at work, we reduce our effort by about half the time. We stop spending as much time on our work. We reduce the quality of the work that we produce. When you experience an act of rudeness, of incivility at work, you're actually less likely to come up with creative ideas. You're less likely to share your ideas with others. You're less likely to want to learn new things. And perhaps the scariest thing that I found is that 90% of employees who experience an act of rudeness say they retaliate in some way, not just against the person who was rude to them, but also against the company. There is literally an epidemic of rudeness that we are all experiencing, and it's like a disease. It's crazy. So to me, if you are not doing something about this in your organization, in your team, you are literally wasting all the resources that you're investing. I mean, this is really scary. I have to tell you, like, I'm looking at my own slides, and I know the numbers that are up here, but every time, this is incredible. But here's the good news. The good news is that we can eliminate all of these negative effects, scary effects of rudeness and incivility by cultivating a culture of kindness. Because more mountains of research show that when you have a team where there's a culture of connectedness and support and kindness, we're more energized to come to work. Employees are more likely to want to learn new skills and tackle problems. We are more engaged, and we're more likely to perform better. I mean, given that what we've talked about, it makes so much sense, but why is kindness so powerful? Well, the first reason kindness is so powerful is anytime you do something kind, you feel good. So anytime you do a tiny act of kindness, your brain releases oxytocin. And oxytocin is known as a hug hormone. So when you hug, we all release it. It makes you feel really good. Really, really good. And we talked about at the beginning that when we feel good, we perform better, we're better collaborators, we're better communicators. And so doing something kind makes you feel good, and when you feel good, you perform better. So that's one of the reasons that doing kind things at work actually makes you better at your job, and it improves how you feel. And do you know, research shows that in the workplace, when we do something kind, we're happier than when we're in the receiving act of kindness, which I think is so powerful. But I think there's something actually deeper at work. I think it's something more than just our brain releasing oxytocin. And it's something that I touched on when I talked about gratitude. When you do something kind for another person, you share a little bit of your humanness with them. You share a little bit of your humanity. And you make that person feel not alone. And feeling not alone, as I talked about when I was talking about gratitude, it's essential to our ability to function, not to mention do great work, not to mention come up with great ideas. And so I think kindness and doing these tiny acts of kindness is what helps us to create that fabric of humanity within our teams and ultimately lead to what researchers talk about as psychological safety. And when I know I'm throwing all these studies at you, but it's fascinating to me. So Google did a study. They looked at all their teams over a period of several years. They wanted to understand what made some teams so much more effective than others. And they looked at everything. Time at Google, salaries, the makeup of the team. They couldn't find a common variable. And so they started looking at how the teams work together. And they had it. The number one factor that made the teams more successful and effective was psychological safety. What is psychological safety? Psychological safety is feeling that you can come to your team and you can be yourself, you can be open, that you will be supported, that you will not be alone. And that's the important fabric of safety and connectedness that practicing kindness helps us to cultivate. So, given how powerful kindness is, I hope all of you are asking, well, okay, so how do I do it? How do I cultivate a culture of kindness? Well, you begin. You begin by practicing kindness, because the awesome thing about kindness is that it's contagious. When you do something kind, the person on the receiving end is more likely to do something kind later on. And now there's research that shows that simply observing an act of kindness makes it more likely that you will do something kind later on. So that's how you begin. You just begin by practicing kindness intentionally as a skill, and you can start a kindness epidemic in your team or your company. So I want to share with you an incredibly simple and very powerful way that you can bring kindness into your workplace. And it's so simple. I love to introduce this because it's so simple but so powerful. Schedule a check-in with a colleague. Now, when I was doing research around this, I was blown away to learn that in several studies, 40% of employees say that when their colleague or boss checks in on them, more than any other measure, any other thing, that helps them feel like they belong. that helps them feel like they matter, which is so powerful. And you probably all check in with some of your friends at work from time to time, but I'm asking you to take it up a notch and actually make it a regular scheduled thing. Put it on your calendar. And when you check in, be open about it. So the whole purpose of a check-in is just to say, how are you? How are things going? Maybe it's about work, maybe it's about life, but the ultimate goal is to help the person feel like you care. And I want to share how one leader who I've been really honored to be inspired by does this in her team. So her name is Michelle Grover, and she's a VP of development at SAP Concur. And when I was talking to her, I said, Michelle, she has a team in multiple countries, in multiple offices. It's a big job. I said, can you tell me what is like the one thing that you do as a manager that you really feel helps you to cultivate psychological safety and connection and this culture of kindness and openness on your team? She said, oh my God, this is so easy. I make it a point that every single week I check in with whatever office I'm working in, that I check in with every single person. I just walk around and I give it a few minutes and I just say, hey, how's it going? And then I don't say anything. I just listen. And she said, single-handedly, this is the practice that has helped me build so much trust with my colleagues. She said, and not only do I get to learn about people's personal lives and it's really like it helps us build trust, she's like, I know when something is about to go wrong because we have psychological safety. People are open. There are many leaders in this room. Each one of you is a leader. Think of how important it is to know when something is going to go wrong. Cultivating a culture of kindness through something as simple as a check-in helps you do that. And it's a huge honor for me to learn from leaders like Michelle. And it's a big honor to work with SAP Concur and their 8,000 employees as part of our Happier at Work program. And I can't not do this. I think a few team members from SAP Concur are here. Can you guys raise your hand? I have to call them out. They're amazing, awesome humans. No, raise your hand, stand up and wave. They're part of a culture of psychological safety and kindness. Woohoo! It's an honor to work with you guys. And it's an honor for me to learn and be inspired by teams that we work with. If you noticed when I said what Michelle does, she said, I ask them how they are, and then I just listen. So a check-in has two really important parts. You ask the person how they are, and then you listen. Not to reply, not to fix the problem, but just to listen. And I want to share with you this awesome visual my yoga teacher shared with me. This is the Chinese symbol for listening. I love it so much. Look at all the different elements. You listen with your ears, obviously. You listen with your eyes. You know what that means? That means you're not doing this on your phone as the person is talking, okay? You listen with your mind. That means you're not going through your to-do list as the person is talking, right? You listen with your heart. And one of my favorite ones, the one in the center, the undivided attention, the focus, the way that my yoga teacher explained this to me is, she said, the meaning of this is that, can you imagine that this person you are listening to is like a really important deity, and you just want to give all of your attention to them? Think about all these elements. That's what it means to listen. And so when you check in, part of your kindness act is to listen and to just help the person feel heard. And because, obviously, I'm so passionate about this practice, I want to give you another way to help you cultivate a culture of kindness in your teams and in your companies. And again, it's deceptively simple. It's to elevate and recognize kindness when you see it. You see a colleague be kind to another colleague, go and tell them you are thankful for them. Go express your gratitude. You see someone do something kind, call it out at the next all hands. Elevate kindness to the same place as we put achievements and milestones and product releases. And for extra inspiration, I just want to share with you what we do as part of our Happier at Work program. One of the rituals we introduce is, I call it a Most Awesome Kindness Trophy. So we actually bring this huge trophy, and the team nominates the most kind, helpful colleague. There's an award ceremony that includes bubbles, obviously, because it would be no fun without bubbles. And then at the end of the week, that colleague nominates another person on their team to receive the Most Awesome Kindness trophy because they've been most helpful, and on and on and on. We now have teams where the trophies have gone around for like weeks and people decorate them. And actually, it's not about the trophy. Every time you get the trophy or you see it on someone's desk, what it sends the signal to the team is, hey, this is important. This matters. This is as important as hitting the revenue milestone or the profitability milestone or releasing the product. And this helps you to bring kindness to the forefront of what everyone cares about. So I encourage you to come up with your own version of Most Awesome Kindness Trophy. Think of your own way to create a ritual in your team to elevate kindness. So I want you to imagine something. I want you to imagine coming into work and being excited and energized and enthusiastic to roll up your sleeves and dive in. I want you to imagine coming into work and feeling that you're part of a team that supports you and encourages you and has your back. Think of all the meaningful work that you're going to be able to do together as that team. Think of all the awesome ways that you will pull together to get through challenges that come your way. I want you to imagine thriving and not just surviving through your workdays. Well, all of this is possible. It is not just a nice idea or a big speech or a nice promise. All of this is possible. And it doesn't require expensive benefit packages or restructurings or offsites. All it requires is to shift your mindset around how you think of emotional well-being and happiness and to begin to practice them intentionally as skills, and not just to do this for yourself, but to encourage people around you to do the same. But it begins with you. It begins with you, every single one of you sitting here, because you cannot give what you don't have. Every single one of you is a leader. Every single one of you here cares about people you work with. You wouldn't be at a conference called Workhuman if you didn't. But it has to start with you. You have to start by shifting your mindset around emotional health and by cultivating your emotional well-being through these skills like gratitude and kindness. And this is perhaps the most powerful and the most painful lesson that I learned when I burnt out, when I was facing losing everything I cared about, including my company and my team and everything that mattered to me. I cared so much about people I worked with. I invested everything I could in them, but until I began to take care of my own emotional health, I couldn't actually help them. Because we as humans are all connected. We have the power, every single one of us, to uplift someone, to encourage them, but we also have the power to spread our stress to them. We also have the power to spread our anxiety to them, and that's what I was doing. And so my call to action to you today is to begin, is to practice. Take one of the practices that I shared and commit to making it part of your daily life at work or outside of your work. Because your gratitude will inspire others to practice gratitude. Your kindness will infect people around you to practice kindness. You have the power to be this agent of change. You have the power to influence this kind of amazing change, and all it begins with you. And so when you begin to practice, when you invest this energy into your emotional health, when you invest a little bit of time in these practices, you're not just doing something awesome for yourself and making a great investment. You're making an incredible investment into all of the people that you work with, and you're giving this amazing gift to all the people that you work with to be able to truly thrive and to be able to do all the meaningful things that they dream about in their life. Thank you so much.